Hi, this is Riggs Eckelberry, and welcome to the replay of 6 February. This is called Water's the New Gold, and I'll explain why that is. We have some great news coming out of Spain with a video, which you'll enjoy. And we then get into what is this decentralization phenomenon as we're seeing it currently in transportation, and then how that connects to what's happening in general in technology disruption and how to spot technology disruption. I mean, what if you'd purchased Tesla stock 10 years ago at $30 and now it's $750? Well, how do you spot these? Because that's key. So I give you some good technical insight on that. And then we get into how OriginClear has this answer to the self-treatment disruption that's happening, and a great report from Dan Early live where he reports from the ground on specific situations he's running into, how this is really happening, and how long ago the decentralization process started before people even knew it was happening. Finally, I end up with some discussion of our offerings. With that, I'm going to let you go ahead and see the show.
All right, so again, this is Water's the New Gold. Our motto here is helping you thrive in the world's only vital, scarce, and recession-proof market. For those of you who are new to this, what this really means is that water obviously is vital. We know it's life or death. Obviously, it's also increasingly scarce commodity. And finally, people keep using water. So it's very recession-proof. Look at what's happening with oil right now. Oil demand is dramatically going down because of an epidemic in China. That's not going to happen with water. So water really is a form of gold, if you think of it that way. And the fact that it is going through underinvestment for infrastructure opens up the OriginClear. With that, the usual safe harbor statement, which is basically says that what I say in this briefing, of course, is fully intended, but may not work out as planned. And we simply have to warn you of that. The other very important thing is I'm going to be talking in this briefing because of demand. I'm going to be talking about the offerings that are in progress, that are planned. And for that, there's a disclaimer that requires accredited investors. It relies on a specific exemption from registration. And obviously, there's always a risk and various restrictions, et cetera. So I'll be happy to discuss it. Any of our people will be happy to talk about the fine print because we want you to be fully aware of them at all times. Okay, so what's been going on here? This morning we announced great results from Spain. Now, you saw, and I'll play a video shortly, so those of you who haven't heard about this, but back in October, we went to Spain to witness a system that was very strong. At the time, they were going to get these independent lab results, and they did. What are these results? 99% reduction of chemical oxygen demand. That, and I put at the bottom here, chemical oxygen demand is basically all the chemicals in water, anything that's not water, that can be oxidized, meaning that can be turned into CO2. Basically, the oxygen can bind with the carbon and neutralize it. So essentially what we've done here is a huge amount of neutralization. Virtually all of the organic materials, chemicals, and so forth are gone. And then reduction of nitrogen by 96%. If you look at what that means is hog farms right now are violating the regulation, Spain's Royal Decree here of the year 2000, and that limited it to 2010 kilos per hectare. Hectare is about 2.5 acres per hectare. We can reduce nitrogen production to 16 kilos per hectare, which is less than 1/10. So that's an amazing result. So with that in mind, we have a little video we're going to play for you.
Estimados amigos y colegas, es un gran honor para mí hablar con ustedes en este día tan memorable. Hace 3 años ustedes nos hicieron una promesa que integrarían nuestra tecnología en su sistema completo para el tratamiento del estiércol.
About 3 years ago,
Deputy Pork went to research the treatment of hog manure. They came upon our technology, reached out, and we negotiated with them a license. Now, 3 years later, they've built a working commercial system. It's proven and it's working amazingly well.
OriginClear Technologies, ese apoyo que nosotros hemos necesitado al final de nuestro largo trabajo de 20 años, la participación de OriginClear. Muy importante para el éxito que estamos teniendo con la puesta en marcha de nuestra planta piloto. La tecnología OriginClear, que ha simplificado, dentro de que es una parte compleja del ecosistema, nuestra reacción ha sido wow, esto es increíble. El estiércol consigamos separarlo en una fase sólida que podemos llevar a compostaje y consigamos agua clara para poder regar la asociación con OriginClear ha sido como marcar el último gol en un partido de fútbol.
Yo creo que juntos realizaremos cambios significantes en la industria de la cría de ganado. Podemos cambiar un problema real a una solución que elimina el desperdicio y también la contaminación de las lagunas de estiércol de larga duración. Muchísimas gracias otra vez a ustedes y que tengamos mucho éxito juntos en el futuro.
Well, that was extremely cool. I'm glad the video corrected me. It was actually November, just before Thanksgiving. But also, you saw in the last frame a picture of Bill Charneski in the group photo, who was very instrumental in making all this happen. He's kind of the quiet guy, but he gets it done, so he's greatly appreciated. I'm going to go back into the share mode now and discuss a little bit about trends. I'm going to be leading up to a point here, so if you'll be patient. For those of you who are joining us, we're about 10 minutes in here, we've been discussing how OriginClear is doing with water treatment. Our win in Spain, we just covered that. And of course, we gave some disclaimers, which are very important. And you'll have some contact information at the end to discuss this. I've been talking to you about decentralization and mass transit, and that is actually a big deal. All right, so decentralization and mass transit. We have a problem in mass transit. I was talking about this earlier, and let me just put this on full screen mode. What is driving the trend towards decentralization in mass transit? Well, first of all central mass transit projects in America, at least, have massive overruns. Just for a subway in Los Angeles, which is not terribly utilized, we have almost a $2 billion cost, which is $250 million over. And it makes you wonder about the California bullet train. Well, the California bullet train is right now not happening. It's got vast cost overruns, and they're building a small segment somewhere in the Imperial Valley that is going to run from nowhere to nowhere just to prove a point. So what's the alternative? And the alternative is very simple. It's a self-driving car. First thing that's happening with self-driving cars is adoption of electric vehicles, because they're vastly more efficient. They work really well as fleet cars, etc., and they tend to be really good software platforms. And so, sure enough, I saw this today, that France just hit 11% market share in January, growing 4 times year on year. And meanwhile, diesel and gasoline sales crashed by 25%. So now this isn't even Tesla. This is Renault and Peugeot cars. All of a sudden, 1 out of 10 cars in France being sold are electric, just like that. So a lot of people have been talking about these adoption things and making these predictions about how we're all going to be electric cars in 10 years. And in fact, we won't even own these cars. They'll be just, on a subscription, you just call for it. People go, this couldn't possibly be. Well, it's happening, and you'll be into it too if your cost of $5,000 or $10,000 a year for your car or truck went down to hundreds of dollars a year, and much less traffic jams, etc. Because of the reduction of vehicles on the road, we're going to dramatically increase the amount of space available. And LA is 1/3 parking lots. There's 2 San Francisco's worth of parking lots in LA. The big challenge is going to be what to do with those parking lots. They will be empty. You'll go to the market, of course, who goes to the market anymore, but let's say you go to the market, your little autonomous vehicle will take you there, drop you off, take off, won't even stop in the parking lot. That's a trend that is really, really happening. So I totally understand when people say, Riggs, I don't understand about decentralization of water because I don't see it. When you think that the decentralization in transportation is happening really fast, and yet at the same time, people are going, well, I don't see it, and it's multi-billion dollars, I totally get it. In other words, the early stages of anything are not super visible, but I guarantee you that's when you want to start. I was not into Bitcoin 10 years ago. It's like, I was not brilliant. I thought of Bitcoin as a novelty. Well, I'd be a different place. I've been serious about that. So think about things when they're ridiculous and not to be even thought of. That's when you need to invest in these things. So think about that. Okay, so I'm going to cover a book that I love, and this book is called Inside the Tornado, written by Geoffrey Moore, and this is a classic about the high-tech life cycle, meaning that there's a product life cycle. You know, it grows, it plateaus, and it then eventually goes away. But in high-tech, it's different, and there's really good reasons for it. And high-tech products are adopted like a tornado. It's also true of just technology, right? High-tech is great, but now it's starting to happen in energy and transportation and so forth. So technology is hitting everything, and it is hitting right in water, as I'm going to show you. Now I'm going to show you something called the bowling alley. Now the bowling alley is the most important thing that I learned during the .com about how to get technology adoption. Let me show this to you. So this is a product life cycle, but it's a product life cycle of high tech and of any technology. Technology accelerates adoption. So you've got to think about technology. So on the very far left, you have, I call this the armadillo. So the nose of the armadillo, what I call the crazy people, the early adopters, the people who they'll buy anything. Wow, yeah, they were the people who were doing keto when it wasn't keto. And they don't do it because they have any particular reason. They just like really things. Then there is a phase of adoption, which you can see there, which is, these are basically the strategic buyers. These are people who see a reason to acquire the technology to get a leg up on their competition. So, and they'll go ahead and they'll create the applications. This is like our partners in India, Permionics, who literally are taking our technology and creating it into mainstream products. And then there's a very important thing called the chasm. You have to cross the chasm. Geoffrey Moore wrote a previous book to Inside the Tornado, which was crossing the chasm. The challenge here is how do you go from people using your technology, but they have to do all this integration themselves, etc., over into this tornado of adoption. The tornado of adoption is sparked by what's called the bowling alley at the bottom. What is the bowling alley? It's basically each one of those pins that you see there. There's 6 of them, but there's going to be a lot more, of course, in any industry, are applications of the technology. For example, we've seen various applications. Well, the one that you just saw the video on with manure effluent, that is a key one. What you do is you create complete whole products that then creates one pin and then another pin for another product, and you keep creating whole products until finally you have critical mass, and it takes off into what's called a tornado. Now the tornado is really interesting because in the tornado, people don't worry about whether something is good or right. They just see everybody else doing it and they adopt it. At that point, it's a race for market share. This is why Tesla's so far ahead of anybody else in the Western world, certainly in America, which is that they have gotten so far ahead that they're grabbing market share. And I would argue to say that electric cars in the US for sure and elsewhere are in the tornado. Why? Because various little applications, you've got now semi-trucks and you've got SUVs and this and that and the other thing, and just from the beginning of the adoption of the autonomous vehicle. So the tornado is where things spin out of control and people just buy it. I remember in the late 90s, the late 80s, I was running a computer company in New York City, and we were trying to use different software, and we had one software called Ingress, which was very, very good. And then there was Oracle, which didn't work at all. And guess what? Oracle won. Why? Because it didn't work in the late 80s, but so many people adopted it that they were like, well, everybody else is getting it. This will work. And sure enough, it did. So Larry Ellison pulled off a tornado with product that didn't necessarily work. Now, on the backside of this, you get the conservatives and the skeptics. In technology, you do not market to conservatives and skeptics. Why? Because they'll do it anyway. They're like the little caboose at the end of the train. They will fall. And so the conservatives will buy, when you're doing like let's say laserjet printers. First you start with the regular one, but then you have a color one, you have a small one, you have one in different colors and so forth. And that's where the conservatives come in. Eventually the skeptics will go, well, I guess I'm just going to have to get this. These are people who were getting laser printers 30 years after they started. So that is the technology adoption process. And we are now moving, I believe, beyond the early market into the bowling alley for water decentralization. Now, I'm going to recap what I did last week, a couple of quick slides. And but just again, for those of you who just joined us, we've been discussing the amazing win in Spain, and we had a video that was fun. And we've also been talking about how this energy and transportation topic is taking off, as I've been discussing these last few webinars. And then finally, we're talking about this inside the tornado concept, which is Geoffrey Moore. So without further ado, I'm going to go on here to, this is from the Lux Research webinar of 2016. And they had a very early and brilliant view of what's going on in water, which is moving from the centralized systems, which is, you can see these little triangles are lift stations, and all those lines are sewage lines, and water is being pumped to a central facility along using these lift stations, continuously lifting it up so it gets somewhere. That's the classic view, and it's worked for a long time. However, we're moving to a new model, which is because of water scarcity and the need to reuse, that is pushing us into decentralized infrastructure. And the lower volumes of wastewater equals, as I say, smaller pipes, because each place is doing its own treatment, therefore smaller pipes are needed. Furthermore, you reduced what's called hydraulic loading to downstream centralized facilities, which means these centralized facilities, which are becoming overloaded, no longer have that load. They don't have to be built quite so big. And finally, you have, because of advanced treatment technologies, which Dan is going to talk to you about, you get localized reuse, which is not something you get with centralized water treatment. Now, what are the barriers? They are, number one, scaling down. Again, something Dan is going to talk to you about. Number two, you've got to have industrial Internet of Things, IoT, industrial Internet of Things, which means appliances at all these locations with sensors and ways to drive it. Because you can't have a water engineer at each location. At most, you'll have a janitor. System reliability, you got to make sure that if you're doing your water treatment at your car dealership, like what we just did, we don't want it to stink. You're trying to sell cars. And then finally, there's some regulation updating needed, but that is happening naturally because, strangely enough, water treatment facilities are increasingly delegating to all these various factories, agriculture, commercial buildings, and so forth. Which brings us, of course, to what we consider as the answer, which is the packaged modular systems. And so I'm going to come off the share and we're going to have a little conversation with Dan. So Dan, I realize I'm going to take you on the fly here, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you're seeing as a witness to what's going on, reviewing these various things that are potentially issues with, first of all, that we have a need for advanced treatment systems, scaling things down, remote monitoring. Tell me a little bit about what you're finding in the field with actual situations.
Well, thank you, Riggs, and it's good to be with you this evening to share some of my insight, some of my background. If you dial the clock back about 25 years, when I entered into the engineering profession, working as a consultant, I spent a great deal of my time working with municipalities that had committed themselves to the long-term model of regional centralized utility implementation and utilization. What I witnessed as a young engineer straight out of college was I was working on projects in the mid-90s where we were rehabbing and rehabilitating dilapidated collection systems, wastewater collection systems, dilapidated water distribution systems, systems that had been in for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, some of them a little bit longer than that. Most of them had been way beyond their life cycle. So as I worked through the 90s and into the early 2000s with my own consulting firm, I saw an increasing demand for this decentralized need, both on the water consumption end, on the clean water side of things, and on the dirty water on the back end of things. And so in the early 2000s, I was approached by some clients of mine as I worked as a consultant. They were like, Dan, what can we do? We need help here. We don't have public sewer. We can't connect to the regional sewer. It's too far away and that type of thing. So what happens is that the need for decentralization has crossed what I call the Rubicon point. It has reached a point where if we don't push forward with decentralization for our utilities, we can't go back. We have to go forward. That is the task that's ahead of us. The things that I began to see and things that I began to experience in the mid 2000s, I was able to participate in some projects where we went off grid. I did some of my very first solar powered on-site water treatment and wastewater treatment and disposal systems for some customers that were very forward thinking. I mean, 2 decades ahead of the curve. Some clients, much larger clients that were much more well-heeled. A good case in point might be the Primland Resort in Virginia. It's a golf club community, got some mixed-use commercial, multifamily, residential, and that type of thing. Very exclusive resort. They committed themselves to a decentralized reuse model. And this was 15 years ago. So the trend has always been there. The thing that is now happening, and this is the thing I'd like to share with the listeners that are with us this evening, the thing that has happened in the last 10 years, and the thing that's happened even more in the last 5 years, is that technology has reached to a point and has evolved to a point where it is much, much more cost effective and much more readily available to implement cost effective and affordable decentralized water treatment and wastewater treatment, reuse, and reclamation. The technologies like Riggs was talking about in the decentralized graphic he had on the screen a few minutes ago about the items, technologies where you do treatment, where you have the ability to do remote monitoring, and you can remotely control the efficiency and the efficacy of these technologies. That has become incredibly inexpensive now. Your cell phone gives you the ability to control these advanced treatment devices. That didn't exist 5 years ago. There is a demand in the marketplace. So technology has evolved, the demand has been there. The cost of regionalization has gotten exorbitantly expensive. I mean, it's out of control. And so now what we see is that there are locations like communities there in Central Florida, on the coast of Florida. There are counties in Long Island and New York where there are moratoriums in place now where they want to implement decentralized wastewater treatment. They cannot afford to extend big regional sewer lines to connect hundreds of thousands of individual customers who do not have access to public water or public sewer. What is going to happen is, just like Rick said in his graphical reference there is going to come a point where the demand and the technology merge and you have this massive adoption of these technologies. And it will happen. We are there today. We are at the cusp, at the doorstep of that taking place. I think the places you will see it will be Florida, New York, water scarcity regions that suffer and experience water scarcity out in the Southwest, California, and places like that. Those are going to be the places where it takes off first. So that is what I am seeing out there in the marketplace.
And I appreciate you looking at the overall 30,000 foot. This is unique to get that kind of view. And it blows me away that it started 20 years ago and that Virginia resort did it 15 years ago. But those were those people at the very nose of the armadillo. Well, of course, they didn't adopt it because they were foolish, but they adopted it because there was some kind of strategic gain they could get out of it. And then now, of course, now it's happening widely. If you wouldn't mind telling me about a couple of specific instances, sharing them of these applications that we think are putting us into the bowling alley of the tornado.
I'll be glad to, Riggs. So the first example that I will discuss is a project that we most recently were able to execute with the OriginClear and the Progressive Water team. We had a project in Pennsylvania. So we're working with a dealership, an automotive dealership. They had a piece of real estate that needed to be developed. It was beyond the normal reaches of public sewer. We were approached, we being OriginClear and Progressive Water, we were approached by a local consulting group. They asked us, said, you guys appear to understand how decentralized works and how to apply it in a small scale fashion. What can we do? What options exist? What technologies can we deploy that would work with the state regulatory code and provide us a solution? So very quickly, once we understood the capacity needs for this automotive dealership, we were very able to recommend a small scale decentralized wastewater treatment unit that would collect all of the black water from the toilets, urinals, and hand sinks, which constituted probably about 90% of the wastewater generation at this dealership. So we provided a treatment system where we collected, treated to an advanced level of treatment using a membrane bioreactor technology. And then we were able to store and recycle that water back into reuse it for reflush and reclamation in the toilets and urinals. So it was a closed loop system. It was a 1,500 gallon per day system. For those listeners that may be on with us tonight, that might be the equivalent to 3 or 4 medium-sized homes, to give you some sense of the size, the hydraulic size of it. Very affordable, very effective. It was far cheaper to do that than it was to extend 5 miles of sewer line to get to the nearest public sewer connection. So that's one good example. Another example is just within the last 2 weeks, we had a customer down in the deep south in Alabama. They came and approached us and said, hey, we have this old wastewater lagoon. We've got a residential development. Our only form of treatment is this lagoon system. It had been in place and had been treating for 40 years. It was out of compliance. It was an old technology. The lagoons have been around for 50, 60 years. Their time has come and gone. As regulatory limits and regulatory changes have created conditions where these lagoons don't work, it's now time to upgrade, connect, change your technology or what have you. So this customer was in that situation. So they came to us and said, hey, we are under the regulatory thumb. We need a solution, or we are going to be fined excessively or possibly incarcerated. What we did is we evaluated their technology and their system, and what we have been able to deploy, or what we're going to recommend and what we're getting ready to deploy for them, is a modular advanced fixed film bioreactor system where we are able to use the lagoon as an asset. We don't have to close it. We don't have to decommission it. We get to use it for what it was intended to, and that was for storage and pre-treatment and partial treatment. But we are going to deploy an advanced biofilm reactor system that basically delivers in the back of a pickup truck. We offload it and we float it in the lagoon. It's got one moving part on it. And we leverage a very powerful biofilm technology that grows in this porous ceramic media that is a part of this treatment system. And so that technology, that system is nominally rated for 30,000 gallons per day. Low energy, low cost, sustainable, durable. So that is another example of the ability to go decentralized and to take advantage of an existing asset that's already in place, and to remove a burden that would be forced upon that utility owner. One thing I would add as I close out this example, that customer, that utility customer, attempted to connect to the public sewer in the adjoining town. All they had to do was pipe it about 500 feet. The local town did not have the sewer capacity, and they could not accept this customer. So they had to stay with the decentralized model because it would take them years to upgrade the public facilities to have the capacity to treat this one utility customer. So that's a good example there.
I love what you're saying there, because these municipalities are essentially forcing people to do self-treatment, and it's a terrible thing, but at the same time, it creates an asset. Now that color utility, let's call it what it is, a trailer park. The trailer park is now its own little micro utility. It's just like that car dealership in Pennsylvania we're talking about, that they have now created more value for their location. And what's great is that you've created these little elegant solutions that are odorless, that in fact, in the case of the trailer park, dramatically reduce odor and take care of themselves. They run pretty much unattended with some remote management if necessary. And I must commend you for doing this, because you really are the Johnny Appleseed of the decentralized water revolution. So Thank you very much, Danny.
You're very welcome, Riggs.
So we're going to continue. I have a pact with my listeners that I don't go beyond about 40 minutes. Otherwise, of course, people are going to start being concerned about their time, especially on the East Coast. But I have, in fact, a question from Keith Roten. Do we have sufficient personnel to handle the influx of orders once our positive solution goes viral? And I can tell you this, have the personnel. In fact, what we discovered here is that we have to pack the pipeline with orders, because even with decentralization, there's these lengthy consultants get involved and this and that and the other thing. One of our really, really good people that joined us, and you know that Dan, is Michael May. He came on as VP Sales, and he proved to us that you do not need to have a water expert to sell a commercial water system, because he developed quite a backlog of forecasted business. He's now helping me with the offering. He's a perfect example, and he will be able to build a sales room that will scale up. And so the key, Keith, and to the listeners, is going beyond just, you've got to have water veterans, to basically having anybody who's trainable on the sales process. And it's a business-to-business sales process, but there's many, many people who know how to do that. And when we have a real estate recession soon, not just joking, but when we have any kind of industry going into recession, those people are then going to want to move over, and we can take them into water. So that I think answers that question. I'm going to quickly go back to the PowerPoint, because I'm going to cover the very important thing to certain people is, what about our funding rounds and what's going on with that? Without further ado, I am going to share that. So thank you, Dan, and just stay in the panel. I appreciate it, and we're going to continue here. All right, so Keith, in fact, sent me, the same Keith who just gave me a question, sent me a note this morning, and I think it's a very good one, because, and by the way, yes, Keith, you can always address me by your first name. He's saying basically, look, mergers and acquisitions are a big deal. And what people need to know is that it takes patience. Basically, the M&A process consists of, first of all, getting a target that you like, getting like you, which actually is relatively easy, given that we're pretty dynamic and people like that we're not just going to get rid of them when we acquire them. But then you need to go in and put the deal together. Now, we believe that we have the ability to do this funding in-house. Why? Because we worked out a way to do it with not millions and millions of dollars, but with a lot less. And meanwhile, our ability to do funding has risen tremendously. So the next step is you then get the funding together. And the third one is you go ahead and make the acquisition. Now, what's very important also is, how do you then replicate that process so each time it becomes faster and faster? And that's when it becomes exciting and wow, because we're doing it every couple of years, but now we need to do several a year, and that's our intention to move forward. So thank you, Keith. That is very much what we're working on. Okay, let's talk about the offerings. We've been going very successfully with an offering for accredited investors only, and or if you're a qualified foreign investor, either way, you can invest in this. It's technically it's $100,000 minimum, but we'll break that down. And what it is you invest, let's say $100,000. You are then getting that back in 2 years. That $100,000 comes back to you, and along the way you get 8% dividend paid. So you've got $16,000 coming back to you over the period, and that $100,000 back. And in addition, you get a stock granted to you. Pretty amazing, huh? And then when that stock grant it's preferred shares, so when you go to convert them to common, we also make sure that you don't lose money on the conversion. So it's amazing. Now, the one downside of this is it's only accredited investors. So what do accredited investors get? Well, that's the Regulation A, which I must caution you is not being offered in this briefing. Let's say you make $50,000 a year, you can invest $5,000. These preferred shares are priced at $25. Now you go, well, wait a minute, Rick, we're sitting around 10 cents. Well, these are preferred shares. They have just a nominal value of $25. What they generate is a 10% annual dividend paid every month. And the difference between what you see on the left is we redeem it when we want to. So theoretically, we could take your investment, which is a minimum of $500, and we could just hold on to it forever and keep paying you 10%. Wouldn't be very smart, because after 10 years, less than 10 years, because of time value of money, we've already used up that money. So it's something we would want to redeem, but that's at our company option. There's some other bells and whistles which we'll discuss at the right time. But remember that this is going through the Securities Exchange Commission approval. Companies take between 60 and 90 days. That we have no control over the process, but we will tell you about it. Now, that offering is, you can tell, is not as great as the one on the left. And so I would strongly counsel, if you're an accredited investor, to look at this current offering. We're going to now talk about the contact information. Ken Berenger at extension 201. Ken is the master designer of our offerings, and he's got an amazing business sense. Michael Mann, who's our VP of sales, who's helping Van Early sell systems, is currently also helping with some of the offerings. And finally, Devin Angus, who's been around forever, and is a direct way to contact with me, or just send an email to invest@originclear.com. I hope to see you again very soon on this channel. And with that, I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you so much, all. Have a good weekend.
Okay, that was the show, and I hope you enjoyed it. A quick poll following that you can click through and give us some feedback. I really appreciate that, and I pay attention to every single one of these. And do be sure to sign up for the coming week's live CEO briefing, Water is the New Gold. Thank you.